Picture a boot-shaped strip of land smaller than California, pressed between two seas. Somewhere inside it sits 61 places the rest of humanity has agreed, formally, on paper, in the language of treaties, are irreplaceable. More than any other country on this planet, not because Italy asked for the honor, because it could not stop producing things worth saving. You think you know this place. The tower that leans, the city on water, the pizza, the wine, the postcard hills gone gold in the evening light. Smell diesel and espresso in the same breath, in a Roman alley barely wide enough for two people to pass. Somewhere above you, laundry strung window to window, moving in a wind that smells faintly of the sea even this far inland. You have seen the postcard. You have never seen the country underneath it. This is Italy. And by the end of this hour, you will understand why one nation, and not the others, ended up holding so much of what makes us human. 61 UNESCO sites, 55 built by human hands, 6 carved by the earth itself, more than China. More than Germany, France, and Spain combined still cannot catch it. A country the size of Arizona, and somewhere inside its borders, sits the smallest sovereign nation on the planet, smaller than a golf course, with its own bank and its own flag entirely swallowed by another country's capital city. Under one of its mountains, an entire city was buried in a single afternoon 2,000 years ago. Historians are still arguing right now in academic journals about which month it happened in. In one town, an entire population lived for centuries inside caves carved into a ravine, until the government of a young republic called it a national disgrace and dragged everyone out. That same town is now protected by the United Nations. One volcano on this same peninsula has been active for longer than written history stretches back. Its slopes now home to hundreds of thousands of people who never once seriously considered leaving. And one small town spent 3 centuries perfecting a single trick: how to build a house that could vanish entirely within a single afternoon, whenever a tax collector came calling. Here is the real question, the one no brochure will ask you. How does a single country end up holding more of humanity's fragile, irreplaceable inheritance than anywhere else on Earth? Is it luck? Is it beauty? Is it something in the water? Or is it something else? Something that costs more than it gives. Stay to the end. There's an answer, and it has almost nothing to do with beauty, and everything to do with what this country has almost lost, over and over, for 3,000 years. Rome, then Vatican City, in the same breath, because you cannot separate them. Stand in the Roman Forum at dawn before the tour groups, and the first thing you notice is not a monument. It's the cats, dozens of them moving between broken columns that have stood since before a man named Jesus was born, indifferent to the fact that they are walking on ground the entire Western world once called the center of the earth. A single shaft of light finds the 3 surviving columns of the Temple of Castor and Pollux and turns the marble the color of bone. Somewhere a scooter engine cracks the silence, then fades. The smell is stone dust and old rain. Here is the paradox nobody quite prepares you for. Inside this city sits another country, Vatican City. Just over 100 acres, smaller than most public parks, with its own passport office, its own postal service, its own bank, its own tiny railway station that receives on average 1 train a week. It has a head of state the world calls Pope. It has its own army in striped Renaissance uniforms, armed, technically, to defend a sovereign border you could walk end to end in 20 minutes. The legend Rome tells about itself is simple, eternal, unbroken, a city that has always been what it is. The truth is messier and better. Rome has been sacked by Visigoths, Vandals, Normans, its population once collapsing from over 1 million to under 50,000. A ghost town squatting inside its own ruins for the better part of 1,000 years. What you're standing in isn't an unbroken line. It's a city that died and was rebuilt on top of its own corpse repeatedly for 2.5 millennia. The Colosseum you photographed today was for centuries a quarry. Popes pulled marble off it to build churches. The blood-soaked entertainment palace of an empire became construction material for the empire that replaced it. Look up, past the ruins, toward the Dome of St. Peter's, visible from nearly everywhere in the old city deliberately, because Michelangelo wanted it that way. There's a word Romans use for this layering, this habit of building the new directly on top of the old, without ever quite discarding it. They don't translate it easily. Something between memory and foundation. Maybe it shouldn't translate. A woman in a gray coat feeds the forum cats from a plastic bag, the same routine she's kept, neighbors say, for 11 years, rain or heat, unpaid, unasked. Nobody photographs her. She isn't part of the postcard. She's the reason the postcard still works. This is not a museum. This is a city that refuses to finish dying. Keep this image. Two governments, one skyline, sharing a single sunset. Because before this hour is over, you'll see this same pattern again. Sovereignty folded inside sovereignty, old inside new, and it will not be an accident. 65 minutes south, and the ground itself becomes the storyteller. Pompeii, and its quieter, better-preserved neighbor, Herculaneum, both buried in a single catastrophic event that Roman chroniclers, writing decades later, dated to the 24th of August, in the year 79. Except historians are no longer sure that's right. Charred fruit found in the ruins, pomegranates, walnuts, belongs to autumn, not August. Wine vessels sealed after a harvest that hadn't happened yet in summer. And in an excavation just a few years ago, archaeologists uncovered fresh charcoal graffiti on a wall, a date scratched in a visitor's own hand, the 16th day before the 1st of November. Days, maybe, before the mountain opened. 2,000 years of certainty, undone by a piece of chalk someone forgot to erase. Walk the streets of Herculaneum and the ash did something almost tender. It carbonized wooden doors, bed frames, a baby's cradle, still resting on its curved base after 2 millennia underground. Walk the streets of Pompeii and the ash did something crueler, voids in the hardened rock where bodies had decomposed, which a 19th century archaeologist thought to fill with plaster. What poured out were casts of the final second, a dog still chained, twisted mid-throw of its collar, a family, arms around each other, facing the mountain instead of running. The wind carried the eruption southeast that first day, sparing Herculaneum the worst of the ash, and then near dawn killed it faster than anywhere else. A surge of gas and rock at highway speed, hot enough to boil blood inside the body. Before the lungs could register, there was no air left to breathe. There's a silence in the plaster cast's room that no guide narrates for you. No wind. No footsteps from the tour ahead. Just the hum of a dehumidifier keeping 2,000-year-old bone from crumbling. And somewhere outside the glass, a single cicada going on as if none of this had ever happened. The vineyards ring the volcano's base today, planted in soil so mineral-rich from old eruptions that the wine carries a name that translates roughly to Tears of Christ. Farmers here know exactly what they're growing grapes on top of. 17 years before the mountain finally erupted, a violent earthquake had already cracked open much of the city. Damaged residents were still patching, slowly when the ground gave way for good. In a bakery near the Forum, archaeologists found 81 loaves of bread, carbonized whole, still sitting in the oven where a baker had left them that final morning. He never came back to take them out. This is a city that didn't end. It paused, mid-sentence, mid-meal, mid-argument, and 2,000 years later, we're still trying to finish reading it. Leave the ruins behind. Go north along the bay, into noise, into motorbikes, into a city that never once tried to be polite about being alive. Naples, in 2017, something unusual happened at a UNESCO committee meeting in South Korea. They weren't voting on a monument, or a ruin, or a mountain. They were voting on a gesture, the specific rotating motion a baker's wrist makes while spinning a disc of dough over a wood fire. The art of the Neapolitan pizzaiolo, not the pizza. The hands that make it. There are still roughly 3,000 pizzaioli working in this city, most trained the same way for 2 centuries, apprenticed as teenagers inside a bottega, standing beside a master for years before they're trusted with the oven alone. Watch one work and you'll see 4 unhurried stages, the dough proofed, stretched by hand, never a rolling pin, dressed in tomato and mozzarella, then rotated into a wood-fired oven at a heat that finishes it in about 2 minutes. No timer. The pizzaiolo reads the crust the way a sailor reads weather. Here is the humbling part. This began as poor food, flatbread and tomato, sold on the street to dock workers and fishermen who couldn't afford a sit-down meal. an entire city's cuisine invented essentially by people with almost nothing. The legend Naples tells about itself is that a queen came in 1889, tasted a version topped in the colors of the new Italian flag, and blessed it with her name, Margherita. The deeper truth is that pizza was already centuries old by then. The poor of Naples had been eating it long before any monarch noticed. There's a rule here, unspoken but absolute. You fold the slice, you don't cut it into little triangles for a fork. You eat it standing, sometimes walking, the way it was built to be eaten by people who had somewhere to be. At 2 in the morning, a woman wipes down her stall. In the old quarter, the last customer gone, the neon still buzzing behind her. This happens every night, whether anyone is watching or not. The dough doesn't care that you're filming it. It rises the same way it did for dock workers who never once thought they were making history. This is a city that turned hunger into an art form the United Nations had to invent a category for. If you already suspected some of what you've heard tonight was slightly off, the Queen, the exact date, the tidy origin story, stay close. That pattern is about to repeat again and again all the way to the end. South along the coast, and the road itself becomes an act of defiance, the Amalfi Coast. A single lane, carved into cliffs so steep that buildings don't sit beside each other, they sit on top of each other. Staircases doing the work roads can't. The terraces are the real monument here, thousands of them, hand-built over centuries into vertical rock, holding lemon trees whose fruit grows the size of a fist, sweeter and less bitter than almost anywhere else on the peninsula, thanks to the particular mineral chemistry of this coastline. Farmers still climb these terraces the old way, narrow stone paths, sometimes hundreds of steps, baskets on their backs, because no machine fits where the lemons grow. There's a rhythm to this place at golden hour, boats returning below, church bells answering each other across ravines that a straight-line map would say are close, but that a walking body knows are an hour apart. Fishermen's nets dry over railings the color of rust. Somewhere a scooter takes a switchback with more confidence than the guardrail deserves. The legend says these villages were founded by shipwrecked Roman aristocrats fleeing a barbarian invasion, choosing cliffs nobody else wanted because nobody else wanted them. Whatever founded them, the coast has spent every century since proving the same point. Humans will build wherever the view is worth it, even when the ground actively resists them. Long before postcards existed, Amalfi itself was one of 4 medieval maritime republics that once rivaled Venice and Genoa for control of Mediterranean trade, a naval power punching far above the size of its own harbor. With its own maritime code that shipping courts across the region are said to have followed for generations after the Republic itself had long since faded into memory. At dusk, in a small kitchen above one of these terraces, a family macerates lemon peel in pure alcohol the way the last 3 generations have, steeping it for weeks before diluting it into limoncello, a ritual timed by taste and instinct rather than any written recipe. The recipe, as far as anyone in this family is concerned, was never meant to be written down. An old woman still climbs to her family's terrace every morning at 78, the same lemons her mother tended, the same baskets, the same switchback path, because the alternative, she says, is letting the terrace go wild, and that isn't really an option in her family. This is a coastline that dared the rock to refuse it, and the rock lost. Now go inland, away from the sea, into stone that isn't a monument at all. It's a home, Matera. Cut directly into a limestone ravine, the Sassi, Italian for the stones, are cave dwellings occupied in some form for close to 9,000 years, making this one of the oldest continuously inhabited settlements on the entire planet. By the middle of the 20th century, this same continuity had become a national scandal. Families living in cave homes without running water, without electricity, sharing space with livestock in conditions a government minister publicly called a disgrace to the nation. In 1952, the state forcibly relocated nearly the entire population to new housing. The caves were left empty, locked, written off. 41 years later, UNESCO inscribed them as a World Heritage Site. Sit with that for a second. The same stone rooms a government called shameful enough to empty by force, the world later called precious enough to protect by law. An elderly woman, one of the few who remember the eviction as a child, still keeps a key to a cave door nobody uses anymore, her grandmother's door, she says. Though the house behind it belongs to a boutique hotel now, she doesn't go in. She just checks that the key still turns. Nobody explains that feeling to you. There isn't a word clean enough. Maybe there shouldn't be. The stone itself has a name, tufo, a soft volcanic rock easy enough to carve with hand tools but strong enough, once exposed to open air, to hold a ceiling for millennia. Beneath the visible caves runs an older, hidden city, a network of cisterns and channels carved to catch and store rainwater, engineered so precisely that some still function today, feeding fountains that nobody ever bothered to disconnect. Walk the ravine at dusk and the cave windows glow amber, one by one, restaurants and guest houses now, in rooms where entire families once slept beside their mules for warmth. The rock still holds the day's heat the way it always has. That part never changed. Older residents describe those winters as surprisingly bearable, the same stone that baked through summer heat, holding just enough of it back through January, that nobody needed much more than a blanket and a shared body's warmth to get by. Children grew up sharing these rooms with goats and chickens, a detail visitors today find almost impossible to picture standing in what is now a candlelit restaurant, pouring wine by the glass exactly where a family once slept beside its animals for warmth. This is a city that was called an embarrassment, then a masterpiece, without a single stone ever moving. Keep going into the heel of the country now, into a landscape that starts to look, frankly, like nowhere else on earth. Alberobello, hundreds of small whitewashed houses, each one crowned with a conical stone roof, no mortar holding a single piece together, a technique with roots reaching back to prehistoric dry stone building, still practiced here unbroken into the present day. The reason for the roofs is the good part. In the 1600s, feudal lords ruling this territory owed the Kingdom of Naples a heavy tribute for every permanent settlement on their land. So the Counts of Conversano encouraged their farmers to build without mortar, because a house with no mortar isn't permanent. It's a pile of stone that happens to be arranged usefully. When word came that a royal tax inspector was approaching, tradition says the roofs came off within hours. Rubble, nothing to tax. When the inspector left, the roofs went back up, stone by stone, in roughly the time it takes to rebuild a wall. It took until 1797 for a king to finally grant the town legal status and end the whole exhausting charade. Painted symbols cover many of the rooftops, crosses, stars, zodiac signs, shapes with no agreed meaning even among locals. Some say religious protection, some say pagan. Ask 3 guides, get 3 different answers, and none of them will admit they're guessing. In one district stands a rare pair of trulli, fused into a single structure, 2 cones grown together at the base. Locals call them the Siamese trulli, and the story attached to them involves 2 brothers, a shared inheritance, and a rivalry supposedly so deep that neither one would ever agree to build a wall between them. Nobody can say for certain how much of the story is true. The house is still standing, exactly the way the story insists it should. Here's one you'll have to sit with unanswered. What does the symbol on the roof above the old bakery actually mean? Even the woman who's lived beneath it for 60 years just shrugs. We won't come back to this one. Some things this country keeps for itself. If you've made it this far, here's something worth sitting with for a second before we go on. Everywhere in this country, the official story and the real story pull in slightly different directions. The queen who didn't invent the pizza, the eruption date that wasn't quite right, the taxman outsmarted by architecture itself. If you'd already caught on to that pattern, tell someone below. Most people don't notice until it's pointed out. This is a town built, quite literally, to disappear on command, and somehow it's the one thing here that never has. Now leave the mainland. Cross open water, southwest, to an island that keeps its oldest habits the way other places keep antiques. Used, not displayed, Sardinia. Somewhere in the hill country, a wheel of sheep's milk pecorino sits aging in a dark room. Its rind deliberately cracked open to invite a specific insect, the cheese fly, to lay its eggs inside. The eggs hatch. The larvae eat their way through the cheese for weeks, breaking down its fats until the texture turns impossibly soft, almost liquid at the center. Locals call it casu marzu, rotten cheese. Italian law banned its sale in 1962. The European Union reinforced the ban in 2002. It remains on paper one of the most tightly restricted foods in the country. People still make it. People still eat it, spread on a sheet of flatbread paired with a bold local red wine, maggots included. Some diners removing them first, others swallowing them whole as a matter of pride. There's one rule everyone agrees on. Close your eyes as you bring it to your mouth. Disturbed larvae can launch themselves several inches into the air. Nobody wants one in an eye. As the larvae work through the cheese, a thin, faintly sour liquid seeps from the rind, one that locals call the teardrop. Proof, if anyone needed it, that the transformation happening inside the wheel is still very much alive. The traditional pairing isn't incidental either. Pane carousel, a paper-thin, twice-baked flatbread that shepherds once carried, folded into their bags on days-long treks across the hills, precisely because it wouldn't spoil, wouldn't crumble, and weighed almost nothing. An old shepherd in the eastern hills has made this cheese the same way his father did, and refuses politely to say exactly where he sells it, not for money. For the ritual of it, the idea that some things shouldn't be easy to find. He'll tell you it tastes like a sharp, aged pecorino with a peppery finish, nothing more exotic than that. And he'll watch your face carefully when you take the first bite. To him, this is Tuesday, just cheese. Just what his valley has always eaten in late summer, long before anyone called it dangerous, long before anyone called it anything at all. The island's shepherds have kept flocks on these same hillsides for so many generations that entire pieces of the local language exist only to describe types of terrain a city person would just call hill. This is food that survived being outlawed by simply refusing to stop existing. Head back across the water and north into Tuscany, into a city that organizes its entire year around 90 seconds, Siena. Twice a summer, the 2nd of July, the 16th of August, 10 horses line up bareback in the city's shell-shaped main square. Riders representing 10 of Siena's 17 ancient neighborhoods, chosen partly by right, partly by a public lottery designed specifically to stop wealthy districts from buying the fastest horse every year. The race itself lasts about 90 seconds, 3 laps around a piazza never built for racing. There is functionally one rule. The horse must win, not the rider. A horse that crosses the line first without its jockey still wins for its district. Everything else, 4 days of processions, trial runs, blessings, secret alliances, whispered bribery nobody quite denies, exists to make that 90 seconds mean something. Hours before the horses ever line up, over 600 people march through the city in 15th century costume. Drummers and flag throwers representing every one of Siena's 17 districts, whether or not their own neighborhood is even racing that year. A pageant nobody gets paid enough to justify, performed anyway year after year, because skipping it was never really considered an option. And there's one rule that surprises almost every first-time visitor. If a horse crosses the finish line first with no rider at all, having thrown its jockey somewhere in the first lap, it still wins. The district still celebrates. In the one contest that actually matters here, the horse was always the point. The rider was optional. Ask a Sienese person when their life story begins, and more than one will tell you the same thing, almost word for word. You are born, there is the paleo, and then eventually you die. It's not really a metaphor. Children are effectively born into a district the way they're born into a family name, and the loyalty rarely fades. Here's the beautiful part and the strange part in the same breath. This is a religious devotion, each race dedicated to the Virgin Mary, wrapped around a horse race with a documented history of injuries, occasional deaths among the horses, and bribery so normalized that supporters and critics argue not about whether it happens, but only about how much. Watch the winning district after the bell, and you'll see grown men weep in the street over a painted silk banner worth, materially, almost nothing. The losing districts go quiet, shutters closed, no music, grief with an actual address, a specific set of streets where you can feel it without anyone saying a word. This is a city that turned civic pride into liturgy and somehow made both stronger for it. Now south, back across the water, to the island where the ground itself refuses to stay still, Sicily. Mount Etna, This is Europe's most active volcano, a mountain that has been erupting in one form or another for longer than recorded history stretches back. It slopes home today to hundreds of thousands of people who built vineyards, towns, entire school systems on ground that could, without much warning, decide to move. Remember the question from the very beginning of this hour. Why does one country hold more of the world's protected heritage than anywhere else? Here on this mountain is the closest thing to an answer. It isn't luck. Italy sits on some of the most geologically and politically unstable ground in Europe. Fault lines, active volcanoes, invasions, plagues, empires that rose here and collapsed here for 3,000 uninterrupted years. Every single stop tonight has carried some version of the same wound. Pompeii erased in an afternoon. Rome sacked and left a ghost town. Matera emptied by its own government. Alberobello built to be torn down on command. This isn't a country that got lucky enough to keep everything. This is a country that lost over and over and rebuilt every single time. And each rebuilding left another layer behind. Layers become depth. Depth becomes what the rest of the world eventually calls heritage. The instability didn't threaten the treasure. The instability is the reason there's so much of it. Farmers on Etna's slopes grow wine grapes in soil blackened by the last eruption, harvesting a crop that could, in theory, be buried by the next one, and they plant again anyway, every single year, the way their families have for generations. Towns on the lower slopes have been damaged and rebuilt so many times that some residents can point to the exact year lava reached their grandparents' street, and the exact year the street was repaved over it. There's no evacuation plan here that promises permanence, only insurance policies with unusually specific fine print and a stubborn, almost defiant agricultural tradition. Soil that looks blackened and lifeless right after an eruption becomes some of the most mineral-rich farmland in southern Europe within a single generation. There's an old volcanologist saying here, half joke, half warning, Etna doesn't destroy this island. It just keeps rewriting it. This is the place where you finally understand that everything beautiful in this country was built on top of everything that almost ended it. Now north again, into Tuscany's gentlest light, into a century that decided all at once to become extraordinary. Florence. Somewhere around the 1400s, this single mid-sized trading city produced, in the span of roughly 100 years, more paintings, sculptures, and architectural breakthroughs than most nations manage across their entire history. Not one genius. A concentration of them feeding off each other, competing, borrowing, occasionally resenting one another in ways that still survive in surviving letters. The legend is that beauty simply flowered here spontaneously, the way it does in fairy tales. The truth is more interesting. Wealthy merchant families, competing for prestige the way rival companies compete today, poured fortunes into art as a kind of public bragging right, a dome, a chapel, a statue commissioned not purely out of devotion, but out of a very human desire to be remembered better than the family down the street. Stand beneath the cathedral dome at midday, and the engineering itself becomes the art, built without a wooden scaffold that could support its weight, using a technique the architect kept partly secret from his own construction crew, so no rival could copy it before it was finished. Look closely at the brickwork inside, and you can still trace the herringbone pattern he devised. Each course of brick locking the next into place as it rose. A puzzle solved in stone that no one has ever needed to repair. A tourist crowd fills the square below by 9 most mornings. Phones raised in near-perfect unison toward the same dome that's been photographed, sketched, and painted for 6 centuries, and the dome somehow has never once looked tired of it. Two of the city's greatest talents, Lorenzo Ghiberti and Filippo Brunelleschi, once competed head-to-head for the commission to design a set of bronze doors, a contest so fierce that losing it, some historians suggest, may have pushed Brunelleschi toward architecture instead, toward the very dome that would eventually outshine anything a door could ever hold. Rivalry in this city wasn't a distraction from greatness. Very often, it was the engine of it. In 1966, the river running through the city's heart overflowed catastrophically, submerging countless manuscripts, paintings, and sculptures under mud and oil. Volunteers arrived from around the world within days, an army of ordinary people the city still calls its mud angels. forming human chains to pass soaked books and panels hand to hand out of flooded basements, saving what they could before it dissolved for good. This is a city that turned rich men's vanity and one catastrophic flood into 600 years of human inheritance. West now, to the coast, where 5 villages decided the rules of normal geography simply didn't apply to them. Cinque Terre. No road connects these 5 villages in any straightforward way. Cliffs on one side, sea on the other. A train tunneling through rock being, for over a century, the only practical way between them. Terraces climb the hillsides in bands, thousands of them, each one hand-built from dry stone, holding vineyards and olive groves on slopes so steep that a visitor glancing up wonders, honestly, how anyone farms them without falling. The terraces exist because flat land here simply doesn't exist. Every usable inch was manufactured, one wall at a time, by generations who had no other option. Fishermen still leave before sunrise from harbors barely wide enough for 2 boats to pass, following routines that predate the tourists by centuries. Laundry strung between buildings, the color of sherbet moves in a wind that never quite stops, salt in it, always. Measured end to end, the dry stone terrace walls holding up these vineyards are said, by some local estimates, to stretch for thousands of kilometers. Longer by that same rough measure than the Great Wall of China, though nobody has ever formally surveyed all of them at once to be certain. What's certain is the grape grown on the steepest, most sun-exposed terraces, a small, intensely sweet variety, dried on straw mats for weeks before pressing, producing a rare dessert wine called Chacatra that some families still make in quantities small enough to sell only to people they already know. At night, after the last train empties the platforms, the villages fall into an older rhythm. A handful of lit windows, a dog barking once, then quiet. Fishermen mending nets by lamplight for tomorrow's boats. The same work their grandfathers did by the same kind of light, just with a different bulb. There's a fragment of a fishing net drying over a railing above Manarola that nobody's claimed in years. Nobody's thrown it away either. In 2011, a sudden flood tore through 2 of these villages, burying streets under mud and debris deep enough to swallow parked cars whole. Residents and volunteers spent months digging the village back out by hand, one street at a time, refusing every suggestion that rebuilding should mean building it differently. When the mud finally cleared, the villages looked, deliberately, almost exactly the way they always had. This is 5 stubborn refusals to accept that a coastline this steep should be uninhabitable. Leave the sea behind, go up, into rock that was once an ocean, the Dolomites. 250 million years ago, this entire range didn't exist as mountains at all. It existed as a shallow tropical sea near the equator, warm water full of coral, sponges, and calcifying algae building reef structures, not unlike the ones you'd find in the Caribbean today. A mass extinction devastated life across the planet. The reefs kept building anyway, slowly. Generation after generation of tiny organisms locking their skeletons into limestone. Then continents collided. The sea floor that held those reefs was lifted over tens of millions of years, thousands of meters into the sky. The mountains you photograph today are fossilized coral. You are looking at an ocean that forgot how to be an ocean. At sunset, the pale rock catches low-angle light and turns a deep rose orange, a phenomenon locals call enrosadera, the reddening. Scientists will tell you it's mineral chemistry reflecting certain wavelengths. Nobody who's actually stood there watching it happen calls it that. Winter here is not weather, it's architecture. Entire villages plan their year around it. Herds move down from high pastures before the first heavy snow, roads that simply close for months. A rhythm of movement between valley and peak that shepherding families have followed for so many generations the practice has its own name. There's a silence up here that has nothing gentle about it. No traffic, no birdsong once the snow settles deep enough. Just wind finding a gap in a rock face and somewhere below, snow shifting off a roof with a sound like something exhaling. During the First World War, this same range became a battlefield unlike any other. Soldiers on both sides tunneling directly through solid rock to plant explosives beneath enemy positions, quite literally detonating pieces of mountain to gain a few meters of ground. Traces of that war are still visible today, if you know where to look. Rusted wire and carved gallery tunnels weathering slowly beside hiking trails families now walk for pleasure. A small population, numbering only in the tens of thousands, still speaks Latin here, a language older than Italian in these valleys. Tucked into a handful of villages where road signs appear in 3 languages. And everybody, without needing to think about it, switches between them mid-sentence. This is a mountain range that spent 250 million years pretending to be an ocean, fought a war across its own peaks, and only recently remembered it was allowed to just be a mountain. One place left, not the loudest, maybe the most honest. Venice, an entire city built improbably on top of water, wooden piles driven deep into the lagoon mud centuries ago, oak and elm that petrified over time into something almost as hard as stone, holding up palaces that were never supposed to last this long. It is sinking, slowly. A few millimeters most years, the exact number a subject of ongoing dispute among the scientists who study it, made worse by rising seas that weren't part of the original arithmetic when the first piles went into the mud. In a squiro, a small traditional boatyard tucked behind the main canals, a craftsman spends weeks building a single gondola by hand. Using techniques passed down through a small number of families for generations, each boat asymmetrical on purpose, curved slightly to one side to correct for the weight of a single oarsman standing and rowing from the stern. He's one of a shrinking number of people alive who still know how to do this the old way. The only sound in his workshop most afternoons is a hand plane pulling a long curl of wood off a hull over and over, and somewhere outside, water slapping gently against a mooring post. Nothing else. Not even his own footsteps. He's stood in the same spot for so many hours a day, for so many years, that he's learned to move without a sound. A short boat ride away on the island of Murano, glassblowers still work furnaces that burn day and night, shaping molten glass with breath and iron tools in a tradition so closely guarded that, centuries ago, the Republic itself made it a capital offense for a glassblower to leave the city and take the technique elsewhere. Several times a year, a high tide called Acqua Alta pushes seawater up through the storm drains, flooding, marks square ankle deep within the hour. Shopkeepers know the drill without checking any forecast. Raised walkways come out, doors get sandbagged, and life continues business as usual, ankle deep in the Adriatic. Remember the very first image of this entire hour, 2 governments sharing one skyline in Rome. Here's the second time, another improbable arrangement, an entire civilization balanced on wooden stilts in a lagoon, refusing, for over 1,000 years, to accept that this shouldn't work. There's a word Venetians sometimes use for the particular ache of loving a place you know is disappearing. It doesn't have a clean translation into English. Maybe it isn't supposed to. This is a city built on a bet against physics. And centuries later, the bet is still somehow not entirely lost. 13 places, 1 country, 61 sites the world agreed to protect, and somewhere underneath all of them, the same pattern. Over and over, something broken, something buried, something nearly erased, and then always rebuilt. Rome, sacked and left a ghost town for 1,000 years, rebuilding itself in layers you can still read today like rings in a tree. Pompeii, erased in an afternoon whose exact date historians still argue about, preserved by the same ash that killed it. Matera, emptied by its own government as a national shame, then protected by the world as a masterpiece, without a single stone moving in between. Alberobello, built to disappear on command, and somehow the one thing that never did. Etna's slopes, farmed by people who know exactly what could happen to their vines, and plant them again every single year regardless. Venice, sinking by the millimeter, still building gondolas the same asymmetrical way it always has. The Dolomites, once an ocean, now a mountain range, still shaping the lives of the shepherds who move through its passes every single autumn. Naples, feeding dock workers of food so undervalued nobody thought to protect it for 200 years, until suddenly in 2017, the world did. This is the answer to the question this hour opened with. Italy doesn't hold more of humanity's irreplaceable inheritance because it got lucky, or because its light is better, or because something in its soil makes beauty grow easier here than anywhere else. It holds more because it has been broken more and refused every single time to stay that way. The instability was never the threat to the treasure. The instability is where the treasure came from. Every layer in Rome's ground is a place something ended. Every terrace on the Amalfi Coast is a place someone refused to accept the land as it was given to them. Every rooftop in Alberobello is a small act of defiance against a tax collector who's been dead for 3 centuries. None of it was inevitable. All of it somehow survived anyway. There's a version of this country you can visit without ever noticing any of this. The beaches, the wine, the photographs everyone already has of the same 6 landmarks. There's another version, the one this hour has tried to show you. A country that has been ash and rubble and abandonment more times than most nations can survive even once. And that kept building anyway, on top of the wreckage, without ever quite throwing the wreckage away. That's not really a story about Italy. Not only. It's a story about what people do when the ground keeps shifting under them, whether they leave, or whether they stay and build something the next disaster will have to work a little harder to erase. 61 places the world has agreed are worth protecting. Somewhere behind every one of them, a person who decided that rebuilding was worth doing one more time. Maybe that's the real inheritance here. Not the 61 sites themselves, but the stubbornness underneath every one of them, passed down, generation to generation, whether anyone ever meant to pass it down or not. Thank you for spending this hour here. If this is the country you thought you knew, I hope it looks a little different now. Layered, stubborn, quietly built on top of everything it almost lost. See you in the next journey. What would you choose to rebuild if you had to start over? Sit with that one for a while.